Hello! It's been about a month since my last video. It's been a little bit busier the past month because I was traveling abroad, visiting my families in Korea. If you are just starting off your search in UX research, as you consider a career in UX research, you're probably looking for resources out there as it relates to UX research methods. When I first started my research in UX research as well, I also remember heading straight to YouTube to see if there are any resources out there that I can learn visibly and audibly. Now, a giant disclaimer is that I am not a professor. I am not a veteran in UX research with hundreds or decades of experience in UX research. I am just here to share about some of these favorite methods of mine and wanted to share some of the resources that I learned a whole lot in when I started my journey in UX research. Before we get into UX research methods, let's start with the types of different research out there. The types that I find the most helpful and useful to use in the real world are generative and evaluative research. I would say these are like the most differentiating in my day-to-day when I come up with research questions and then try to map it to what type of methods would help best answer those questions. Generative research helps you define the problem that you would like to create a solution for. Evaluative research, on the other hand, allows you to evaluate and test different experiences and designs. There's also the different types of attitudinal and behavioral research, where behavioral research assesses what the user actually does. So what is this user doing here? What are they clicking into? What are they spending more time doing in this certain screen? What kind of information are they spending more time to read versus others? And then attitudinal research assesses users' attitudes and feelings toward an experience. Why is this user doing what they're doing? So it really digs into the why somebody's doing something, why somebody's feeling this way, why somebody is behaving this way. Honestly speaking, there's just so many different types of research methods out there, and people who have a master's degree or a PhD degree in human psychology or sociology probably know a whole lot more than those of us who learned on the job, like myself. Just know that most UX researchers don't know every method out there. Even if they do know everything, all the methods out there, they probably haven't practiced all of these methods out there. I know it feels overwhelming to look at a giant list of all the UX research methods out there. What I would suggest is to start somewhere small and start learning and practicing them one at a time. Maybe starting with some of the methods that I recommend today. What's more important than the number of methods that you have on your belt is the research questions that you have. Your entire research process really starts with really understanding the problem space, fully understanding the research questions and the research goals you have. And there's just various ways of getting those questions answered. We are just using these different research methods to try to best help answer the questions that you have. And especially in a lot of research job interviews out there as well, your interviewer may give you a scenario how you would tackle those problem space. What kind of research plan? It's really super tempting to dive straight into recommending a research method to best help answer those questions. But what's more important than the method is that you fully understand the problem space and walk them through your thought process and your research process, and suggest what kind of research plan or research method would best help answer those questions. So I would suggest spending more time in understanding the problem space and the scenario and what kind of information is needed to best kind of identify those questions, like those core research questions, before diving into solutioning. Now let's really get into the 3 different types of methods that I found personally really helpful when I first started as a beginner in UX research. So my top 3 methods are, first, I'm going to start with user interviews. User interviews are facilitated with existing users or potential users of your product. And it usually happens in the earlier stages of product development. So many people rely on user interviews because you get a lot of qualitative learnings from this one method alone. When it's constructed well and without biased questions, you get to really dig into your users' pain points, your users' needs, motivation, feelings, what their routine may look like when they're using your product, even how they use your product. In terms of the length of each of the session that you're running, it really depends on the scale and scope of your research questions, but I usually like to run at least 30 minutes to an hour a session. What's really important here is recruiting for the right participants for your study that are representative of the larger group of your target users that you would like to talk to, and asking them a series of carefully planned and delicately formed questions without biased questions that are leading. They can be as detailed as you want or loosely formed as you want, but you also want to come up with some follow-up questions to ask when they're pretty free-formed. I would like to share a user interview discussion guide. This kind of shows you a good idea what user interview questions would look like and how to best prepare for your interviews with your users. When I first started, I think the hardest part for me was to come up with the questions itself. An example of a question is, what do you expect to gain from this product? And let's say your participant gave you a super vague answer and they said, I would expect an excellent experience. That's okay. Some of the follow-up questions may be, can you tell me more about that? How would you define an excellent experience? Another example is, let's say you ask the question, what do you think about the information presented to you when you were first onboarding? And let's say your participant said, I don't know, I don't think it was very useful for me. And maybe you just need to say, can you tell me more about that? Or can you tell me which part of the onboarding process was not useful for you? The biggest advantage of user interview is that you're really digging into the why a user is behaving in a certain way. Why a user is feeling, thinking, behaving in a certain way. So you would ask a lot of probing questions to really understand what the problem is and where the problem is. Are we missing a major user need in our feature? What even is a user need in this particular feature? Why are they feeling frustrated? Why do they even like this feature so much? What can we learn about the psychology and the mindset that lead to a particular behavior or a user need? The second method that I'm going to introduce is the usability testing. Usability testing is when you provide a real user of your target audience with a new design, an updated feature, or even an existing product so that they can assess and test its usability. With this method, you're trying to evaluate the ease of operation, usefulness, utility, accessibility, and ease of understanding of terminology or language. It will help uncover problems like, is this button discoverable for our users? Or, does this explanation about our rewards program make sense to our users? Or even, where do people even get stuck in using our app? Usability tests are great when you're sketching out ideas with your designers or if you have early prototype. A lot of people may ask how many participants you need for a usability testing, though the more the better, the more complete your insights are going to be. Study shows that 5 users or 5 participants will find 85% of the usability issues when testing continuously. So technically speaking, this study also found that you need at least 15 participants to discover all the usability errors in your design. But why do we keep saying that 5 users is going to be enough for usability testing? It's the most efficient usage of your budget. So instead of blowing all of your budget into this one elaborate, perfect study that will find all the usability errors, it's a better investment to spend those budget on 3 different studies with 5 participants per study. By iterating on it, updating the design based on the results, and then testing the updated design once again, and then getting some learnings, and then testing it again. Well, that's what we call an iterative development. By testing it out, doing it again, fixing, testing, fixing, testing, fixing. And the third method that I'm going to introduce to you is going to be called the contextual inquiry. This is a type of ethnographic field study that involves both in-depth observation and in-depth interviews for a deep understanding of everyday practices and behavior. It's a research study where a researcher observes the nature of the task and inquire about the action that the participants may take. This is a good mix between a usability testing, which is mostly behavioral, and then a user interview, which is attitudinal type of research. This is also usually taken at the earlier stages of development, where you watch people do something in their own natural environment and you ask questions around reasoning for their behavior, action, and the kind of underlying mental models behind their action. Rather than relying on your user's memory for something that had happened in the past. With this study, we're seeing these behavior in action, and then you get to ask the questions in the moment about the in-depth thought process, motivation, and reasoning behind their action. The 2-step pattern is that you watch and learn, and then you stop and ask questions if the user does something that you don't understand, or where you want to dig deeper into root thought or mindset of that action, or if you want to just like validate your hypotheses too. A lot of the questions may be like, why did you do that? What made you click on that? So all in all, I think these three are used very frequently in my day-to-day, of course, depending on the type of questions that you may come across in your product. Also, I wanted to walk you through some of the most helpful resources that I learned a heck ton of when I first started my UX research journey. I linked the Nielsen-Norman Group's, I can never say that word, Nielsen-Norman Group page called Research Methods. And from my experience, they provided the most helpful resources on how to actually conduct a study. What type of research methods are out there, and then literally it's like a guide from A to Z about anything really as it relates to more commonly used research method in UX. I also learned a heck ton when I first started in this usability.gov website. I have a lot of different resources and information, but I know that they stopped updating the website, unfortunately. I told you my 3 top favorite research methods, but these aren't going to be everything that you would need. But let me know if this video was helpful to you at all. Before I end, thank you so much, Simon Serves, for gifting this mic to me. I don't know how I sound. I hope I sound better. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!